Good afternoon. Today I'm reading 3 further accounts of memories that arose along Nicholson Street as I walked it in 2008, part of a project titled The Tertiary World, and the series of accounts of these walks are also titled The Tertiary World. Nicholson Street is the 6th north-south street. Its colour is indigo, and this is the second memory. 753 Nicholson Street. Hatton Brothers, the local menswear store, stood next to Montegano's chemist shop. I worked here on Saturday mornings right through the last 2 years of high school. Mr. Lou Hatton, the only one of the brothers I ever saw, always wore a hat and was a kindly and polite man. I invited him to the opening of my first exhibition, held in the Athenaeum Gallery in Collins Street. He came, of course, accompanied by his wife. They politely inquired, one by one, about every painting, and I think he even considered buying a particular watercolour titled The Sadness of a Courtyard. I think he was attracted to the proposition that a courtyard could be sad, but in the end the proposition of sadness itself seemed not so palatable to him. Still, he was the first person I ever attempted to explain something of mine to, and though it had been a harrowing experience, how do you explain how a courtyard elicits sadness when you're 19? I felt as though I'd experienced a rite of passage. I've always been grateful to Mr. Hatton for asking all those difficult questions, and even more grateful for not buying the watercolour. It seemed to me that he was far more interested in what an artist might attempt than the work itself, and this was something I realised excited me far more than any sale. In the end, I gave that watercolour away to one of my parents' friends. One grey Sunday afternoon in early winter, these particular friends, who 10 years earlier had shared the journey with us from Trieste, finally decided to buy their first house in Faulkner. I gave them this watercolour as a gift on the occasion of our first visit to their house, which they had kept calling an exhibition home. This had conjured up for me intriguing images of the house itself as an exhibited object, though I soon learnt that in fact it had been a display home. But I have always felt that Mr. Hatton's inquiries that evening somehow paved the way for me to enter into a deeper layer of my sense of self as artist. And he and his wife gifted me that evening with something I would find impossible to ever repay. Our Lady's Church, further along Nicholson Street. We walked to this church each Sunday for Mass, and it rained, and if it rained, we drove. All my footy teammates from St Bridget's YCW would be here as well, as most lived closer to this church than to St Bridget's. We would all be making silent fun of various aspects of the Mass and of the faithful, until the priest would sternly remind us from the pulpit of how serious the proceedings were. Afterwards, our families would chatter outside as others made their way into the church for the next Mass. So much information was exchanged during these few compressed moments. One Sunday morning, I suddenly understood that the regularity of the ritual had become far more comforting than the experience itself. And I knew then that I would never again return to Our Lady's to hear Mass. I remember the date on which this understanding came to me, Sunday, July 3, 1967. I remember this date because on that afternoon we played a rare Sunday football match, and I ended up kicking 8 goals. I played with such carefree abandon, knowing where the ball would be and moving easily to it, seeing everything in slow motion, finding empty space at will. I felt as light as air itself, as though on this day my young life was about to begin anew. The Nicholson Street tram depot, which was opposite Montegano's pharmacy. The former tram depot has now become the terminal for the National Bus Company, but trams manoeuvred in and out of there until the late 90s. I used to watch them from Roberto Kodnich's front office, endlessly wheeling and wailing in and out of the huge corrugated iron sheds. They seemed to me like the bodies of tired workers being put to sleep somewhere dry and safe for the night, resigned to yet another resuscitation the following morning. Watching the movements inside a tram depot made me, I believed, far more appreciative of a tram's essential nature than otherwise I might have been. On entering and alighting from each one, I would be mindful of how they served endless numbers of passengers, of their unquestioning, ceaseless efforts, of their almost heroic abnegation. Grateful, I'd step lighter onto the street and then admiringly watch the bulk of the vehicle that had just hosted me move away along its pathway towards its destination. I did this much in the way you might approvingly look on to a team of horses efficiently drawing along a wagon, or admiringly observe the purposeful dedication of a sailor moving nimbly aboard his vessel. But this is the way I then looked upon the world, endlessly anthropomorphizing animals, plants, steel and wooden objects, even clouds. (717) Nicholson Street. For many years I bought all the kids' shoes in this little store. We would walk in and immediately smell the distinctive aroma of leather, all kinds of leather, bags, shoes, coats, belts, sandals, cushions, even a leather globe of the world with patchwork continents in red and pink and yellow and green. I used to sit in the large leather armchair in the corner with them nesting in my lap, trying on various styles and sizes, and then I would watch them walk out of the store, looking down at their new shoes and beaming with pleasure. I would often think of where their future steps might take them, of where these small new shoes would accompany them. Red, blue, yellow, those were the colours they loved. And they were such small shoes, such very small shoes. To chronicle their steps from those days until now would take a huge number of volumes and many more readings. Until tomorrow for the last memories of Nicholson Street. Until then.